Alabama, 1858. Thunder rolled low as flames rose high, bending the night itself. Men who ruled through terror found themselves kneeling before their own burning fields. At the center stood Aaron Gray, silent, bare-chested, carved in lightning and resolve. They called him mad, but madness does not move with such calm purpose. By dawn, the Gray plantation lay in ash, and the name Gray no longer belonged to its owners. Aaron Gray entered the world, not with a cry, but with a quietness that startled the midwife. He was born in a cramped cabin on the outskirts of Montgomery, where the walls leaked winter wind and the floorboards knew more sorrow than sleep. Outside, the night hummed with the clanging of hammers from the gin house, iron shaping the very machines that would one day shape the lives of every African American trapped on that soil. His mother, Lottie, held him close and whispered prayers older than the land beneath her feet, prayers carried across the Atlantic in wombs, storms, and memory. They were prayers from the Niger Delta, soft, rhythmic, meant to ward off spirits that fed on despair. The dogs outside always grew quiet when she prayed, as if they sensed a power they could not name. Aaron never met his father. Sold south, they told him, using the phrase like a curtain drawn over an unhealed wound. As if geography could erase blood, as if distance could sever a bond written into bone. The adults spoke of him rarely, but when they did, it was with a heaviness that suggested the man had not vanished but been stolen. Aaron learned early that disappearance was a language on plantations, one that everyone understood, but no one wanted to speak. His childhood was built on layers he could see but not change. The sky belonged to God, the fields to the master, and everything underneath to command. His earliest memory was not of a toy or a voice, but of firelight shining on a shackle being repaired. He watched the iron glow red, heard it sizzle as a hammer bent it back into usefulness. He reached toward it, curious, and felt the heat kiss his palm. His mother slapped his hand away, but the warmth lingered not as pain, but as prophecy. As he grew, he became a child who asked few questions and listened to everything. He watched how the overseers walked always in a straight line, as if their authority depended on never looking down. He watched how the elders carried themselves bent backs that still managed to hold dignity like a lantern in wind. Lottie worked in the quarter, washing clothes, nursing the sick, whispering stories of ancestors who had never bowed. Sometimes, her voice cracked, but she kept telling them anyway, as if each story was a brick in a secret foundation no master could see. Aaron's body changed quickly. By 10, he had the shoulders of a 14-year-old. By 12, the strength of a man who had already been denied childhood. He learned to lift, haul, pull tasks that hardened boys into tools. But his mother saw something else in him, something she feared and honored at the same time. "You walk like a river holding its breath," she told him once. He didn't understand then, but rivers, he would later realize, are quietest just before they break their banks. Every night, before he slept, he stared at the crack of sky visible through the cabin roof. Stars glimmered through it, like distant eyes, watching, judging, waiting. He wondered whether those stars had watched his father too, watched the moment the man was dragged across the yard, watched the cart wheeled south, watched the dust swallow him. Aaron grew up knowing two truths, that fire changes shape depending on who holds it, and that silence is a tool sharper than iron. One day, he told himself, he would no longer be the one reaching toward heat. One day, he would be the one holding it. By the time Aaron turned 12, he stood taller than most men, and carried a weariness that made him seem older still. Cotton ruled Alabama like a monarch dressed in white, and every boll plucked from its thorny branches took a toll in flesh. The fields stretched wider than hope itself, endless rows of white that shimmered beneath the sun like the crest of a silent, merciless sea. Overseers patrolled those rows with rifles slung across their shoulders, tapping the wooden stalks like metronomes of fear. Their presence was a reminder that every breath taken on that land was a borrowed one. Though young, Aaron worked beside the adults without complaint. Not because he lacked pain, but because he had learned to bury it where no overseer could reach. Sweat blinded him, thorns cut him. The sun carved its judgment into his back, and yet he kept moving, unwavering, as if the field itself were a teacher, and he was determined to pass its lessons. He didn't speak often. Words were dangerous when overheard, and wasted when ignored. Instead, he listened. He listened to the creak of wagon wheels that brought supplies from town, to the heavy boots of patrols who circled the quarters at night, to the whispers of men who dreamed of escape, and the sobs of women whose sons had been sold south before dawn. This silence, Aaron's profound, deliberate silence, became his shield. It was a silence that contained no surrender, only study. He was not praying for deliverance, he was measuring it. Every sound became a clue. Every routine, every pattern, every flaw in the plantation's armor was committed to memory. The mastery he sought was not spiritual, it was tactical. He noticed that wagons returned lighter than they left, though the ledgers claimed otherwise. He noticed that the patrol's lanterns sputtered at the same corner of the fence every night, fueled by a cheap oil that burned too fast. He noticed that the barn roof leaked dangerously close to where the master stored gunpowder. And most importantly, he noticed how the overseers grew careless when drunk, tossing their lanterns onto damp ground as if flame had no memory. Sometimes, during supper, he watched the masters eat through the cabin window, saw the way they spoke casually about profit while men collapsed in the fields. He saw how they praised God on Sundays and whipped boys bloody on Mondays, and he understood, slowly, painfully, that the empire they built was not supported by cotton, but by the silence of those who harvested it. But silence did not mean acceptance. Aaron memorized the plantation the way a storm memorizes a coastline, quietly, patiently, and with intent. One evening, as the sun faded and the sky turned the color of dying embers, Aaron helped an older man named Reuben carry a bushel that was too heavy for him. Pike, the overseer, saw it and struck Reuben across the shoulders. Aaron stepped forward instinctively but froze when Reuben shook his head. "Not yet," the old man whispered. That night, Aaron dreamed of the shackle he had touched as a child, the glow, the heat, the prophecy. The dream lingered long after he woke, sitting upright in the dark cabin with his fists clenched. Cotton might feed empires, but fire was older than empires. And in Aaron's mind, fire had begun to whisper instructions. Pike arrived at the gray plantation long before Aaron was born, but by the time Aaron turned 13, the man had become a storm with a pulse. Pike was not large, nor particularly strong. His power came from his devotion to cruelty. It was said he once baptized a man in a horse trough until the bubbles stopped, then called it correction. His whip was named gospel, and he wielded it with the same zeal a preacher reserved for scripture. To Pike, authority was best expressed on skin. He viewed every African American under his command as a canvas on which to paint obedience. He watched Aaron more than the others, though he pretended otherwise. Something about the boy's walk unsettled him, the way he moved with quiet certainty, never rushing, never stumbling, as if the ground itself had agreed not to trip him. Overseers were trained to recognize defiance in words or action, but in Aaron, defiance lived in posture. One afternoon, Pike caught a young boy, Jonah, slumped beside a cotton row, feverish and shaking. Instead of offering water, Pike kicked him, muttering that weakness spread faster than sickness. Aaron stepped forward without thinking, lifting Jonah from the dirt. Pike's eyes narrowed. "You put him down," he ordered. Aaron didn't speak. He held Jonah until the boy could stand, then supported him toward the shade. Pike's lips curled as if he tasted something sour. For the first time, Aaron saw it clearly: fear. Not fear of rebellion, but fear of losing control. Pike needed submission the way a drowning man needs air. Aaron's refusal to bend made Pike feel like he was slipping underwater. The overseer tried subtle methods at first, assigning Aaron double loads, forcing him to the front of the rows where the sun hit hardest, taking away the few hours of rest he earned. Aaron absorbed the punishments with the same quiet intensity he gave to everything. He did not break. He did not bow. And that, more than anything, infuriated Pike. Then came the night Pike decided to make an example. Aaron heard the shouts before he saw the glow. Pike had dragged Reuben, the old man who once whispered, "Not yet," into the yard. The overseer claimed Reuben had stolen a biscuit, but everyone knew it was a lie. Aaron arrived just as Pike raised the whip. He didn't step forward, didn't speak, and that was what Pike hated most. He wanted Aaron to plead, to protest, to show some sign of fear or dependence. But Aaron stood still, jaw tightened, eyes unblinking. The whip cracked. Reuben collapsed. Aaron exhaled once, slow, controlled. Pike mistook this restraint for weakness, not knowing that the boy's silence was not submission but a calculation. Aaron was counting steps, flames, exits, timing everything he would need for a night yet to come. In the following days, Pike watched Aaron obsessively. He tried provoking him, insulting him, taunting him with stories of men sold south, the way hunters brag about trophies. But Aaron offered no response. Pike didn't understand that empathy and rage are twin forces, born of the same fire. Aaron carried the wounded, buried the dead with reverence, whispered comfort to the terrified. The overseer saw kindness. What he failed to see was that kindness is not the opposite of rage. It is the fuse that makes rage moral. A week later, Pike staggered through the yard after too much whiskey, lantern swinging carelessly at his side. He muttered scriptures to the wind, unaware that Aaron watched from the shadows. The young man's eyes tracked the lantern, the sway of its flame, the tar paper walls of the cotton gin, and the stash of dry bales stacked to the rafters. Pike thought he owned the night. But Aaron understood something Pike never would. Fire remembers every hand that harms. Eliza was a fixture in the kitchen long before Aaron grew into his height. She moved through steam and smoke the way a dancer moves through curtains, unhurried, intuitive, as if she had been born inside a simmering pot. Her eyes, the color of burnt sugar, missed nothing. Not lies, not danger, not the smallest flinch of a hand about to strike. She had lived long enough to understand the difference between resignation and coiled intention. Eliza noticed Aaron before he noticed her. She watched him carry half-conscious workers back to their cabins, rinse their wounds with water meant for the livestock, then return to the fields before anyone realized he had been gone. She saw the way he absorbed Pike's cruelty without letting it shape him, how each lash that landed on another person etched itself instead onto Aaron's memory. "You walk like a man counting," she told him one afternoon, while stirring a pot of stew thick enough to hide secrets. "Counting what?" Aaron replied. "How long until you stop bending?" He said nothing. She didn't need him to. Eliza had her own history with rebellion. Born in Saint-Domingue, she carried memories of an island that once burned its chains and crowned its own sons as kings. She was only a child then, but she remembered the way the sky glowed red, how the elders sang hymns that sounded like thunder, how the fire didn't discriminate between masters' houses and slave quarters. It swallowed everything built on suffering. She never spoke directly of those nights, but she carried them the way soldiers carry scars, quietly, but with the knowledge that they can reopen if pressed. When she gave Aaron a small vial of lard mixed with ash, she claimed it was for wounds. But he saw the truth in her eyes. It was for fire. For moments when choices had to be made quickly, decisively, irrevocably. Their conversations took place in fragments, never full sentences, never more than a few breaths long. They met near the smokehouse, where no one cared about shadows. Eliza told him how smoke behaves in wind, how cotton burns faster than dry leaves, how people panic when they smell flame before seeing it. She spoke of men who ran toward fire out of arrogance, and men who ran from it out of instinct, and how both kinds could be predicted. "Fear travels faster than heat," she once said, slicing onions as calmly as if discussing weather. Aaron filed the words away. Some evenings, while the fields slept and the frogs croaked their midnight sermons, Eliza hummed the old songs from her island, songs of rebellion disguised as lullabies. Aaron didn't hum along, but he listened with a focus that made her breath catch. She recognized that kind of attention. It was the attention of someone preparing not to flee, but to ignite. He wasn't dreaming of escape, he was studying combustion. One night, as thunder rolled in from the west, and rain thickened the air, Eliza found Aaron sitting alone behind the kitchen, staring at the cotton gin in the distance. She lowered herself beside him. "You're waiting," she said softly. "For what?" "For the night the fire stops asking permission." He looked at her then, the first real look he ever gave her, and for a moment, Eliza saw not a boy hardened by injustice, but a man already standing inside his destiny. She exhaled. "When that night comes," she said, placing the vial of ash in his hand, "don't look back." He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because somewhere deep inside Aaron Gray, the fire had already been lit. By the time Aaron turned 17, the Gray plantation was a machine with a heartbeat made of cotton. Its pride and its profit sat inside the gin house, towering white bales stacked so tightly they formed walls thicker than the master's own. Tar paper roofing trapped heat, and the smell of lint hung in the air like an unspoken warning. Every man on the plantation knew that one spark in the gin was enough to turn harvest into hell. Everyone knew, but only one man truly listened. The breaking point came on a day when the sun scorched even the shadows. Jonah, the fevered boy Aaron had once helped, collapsed again in the field. His breath rattled like a dying bird's wing. Aaron knelt beside him, whispering reassurance, lifting his head gently. Pike saw them and stalked forward, whip drawn. "You coddle him, Gray," Pike snarled. "Weakness spreads like rot." Aaron didn't flinch. He didn't bow. Pike struck him across the mouth so hard that copper filled Aaron's tongue. The overseer waited, chest heaving, expecting resistance, expecting anger, expecting something he could punish. Aaron simply wiped the blood with the back of his hand and looked at him with eyes so quiet it unsettled everyone watching. That night, thunder rolled across the fields, dragging sheets of rain behind it. Aaron left his cabin after the quarter fell asleep. Barefoot, bare-chested, he crossed the yard with the stillness of a man walking into a vow. The rain dampened everything except the fire in his chest. The cotton gin door creaked when he pushed it open, a single sound swallowed by the storm. Inside, the air was dry as old bones. Cotton bales towered overhead, pale and silent. Aaron approached one, lantern in hand. The flame flickered like it recognized him. He touched the fire to the bale and whispered, "You don't need me to spread." He wasn't speaking to the cotton. He was speaking to fate. The first bale caught with a soft hiss. Then another, and another. Flames danced upward, eager, remembering every injustice thrown onto that land. Cotton burns fast, faster than paper, faster than leaves, faster than men can react. Within seconds, the room became a furnace. Aaron stepped back, watching the fire bloom. Not in triumph, in inevitability. He didn't run, he didn't hide. He walked out into the rain and stood in the yard while the orange glow swallowed the horizon. Lightning cracked overhead, a thunderous applause that seemed to say the night had finally chosen its side. By the time the alarm reached the master's bedroom, the gin house was an inferno. Workers stumbled out into the storm, shouting, screaming, pointing. Pike, drunk as always, burst from the cabin with a pistol in one hand and a lantern in the other. He sprinted toward the blaze, slipping in the mud. Through the roar of thunder and fire, Pike saw him, Aaron, standing still, facing the burning gin as if watching scripture unfold. "You!" Pike shouted, voice cracking under panic. "You did this." Aaron didn't move. He didn't need to, because the fire was answering for him, and with every crackle, every collapse, every ember rising into the storm, Aaron's destiny sharpened like steel pulled from flame. Tonight was not about destruction. It was about revelation. The fire was no longer prophecy. It was beginning. Jacob Gray woke to a smell he couldn't place at first, something sharp, metallic, unnatural. When he stepped outside, his nightshirt clinging to his skin, he realized what it was. Burning cotton. The fire painted the sky the color of judgment. His empire, his fields, his labor, his wealth was dissolving into smoke. "Water! Buckets! Move!" he screamed, but his commands scattered like frightened birds. Panic had its own gravity. It pulled men in every direction except the one that mattered. Pike staggered toward the gin house, half insane, half aflame. His sleeve had caught fire, and he slapped at it clumsily. "Aaron," he bellowed, the name ripping from his throat like a confession. "Where is he?" Aaron stood 20 yards away, motionless in the rain, arms at his sides, chest gleaming beneath flashes of lightning. He looked like a statue carved from defiance. Jacob Gray froze when he saw him. For the first time in his life, he felt something cold and choking slide down his spine. It took him several seconds to name it. Fear. "Aaron," Jacob called out, his voice cracking under the strain. "You don't do this. This land is blessed by God." Aaron took a single step forward, not aggressive, not rushed, just inevitable. "You said this land was blessed," he replied quietly. "It's just returning the favor." Another explosion echoed from the gin as the roof caved in, sending sparks into the night like a flock of burning birds. Jacob dropped to his knees. Whether in prayer or surrender, no one could tell, least of all Jacob. The rain hit him hard, plastering his hair to his face, washing away soot, but not guilt. Pike ran toward Aaron, pistol raised. The mud betrayed him. He slipped, crashed to his knees, and the lantern he carried flew from his hand. It shattered beside him, igniting a burst of flame that clung to the wet ground like it refused to die. He scrambled back, screaming as fire crawled up his pant leg. "Help me!" Pike shrieked. "Help me, damn you! Aaron!" Aaron didn't move. He simply watched calm, unblinking as Pike's own carelessness consumed him. It was not revenge. It was symmetry. Several field hands rushed forward with buckets, but the wind turned against them. Flames leaped from the gin house to the storage shed, then to the wagon filled with tar barrels. The explosion that followed sent men diving to the ground. Aaron didn't dive. He simply stepped back as heat rolled across the yard in a wave. Through the downpour and the chaos, children clung to their mothers. Men who once feared raising their eyes now stared openly at the burning estate. They saw a master kneeling, an overseer screaming, and Aaron standing tall. Something shifted in that moment, something no law or whip could undo. The plantation order had reversed. The fire did not burn random. It burned truth. Jacob Gray crawled through the mud toward Aaron, reaching out with shaking hands. "Please," he begged, "please, stop this." Aaron looked down at him. Not with hatred, not with pity, with clarity. "This isn't mine to stop," he said. "This is the night choosing what survives." Another crash split the air as the big house caught fire. Flames raced up the columns like serpents reclaiming a stolen throne. Behind Aaron, men and women began gathering, not running, not hiding, gathering. The night bowed. The master bowed. And for the first time in its history, so did the fire. The fire had become a beacon long before the last roof collapsed. Its glow reached the slave quarters, first an amber pulse through cracks in the wood. Then a roar felt more than heard. Mothers woke their children. Elderly men sat upright, eyes wide but unafraid. Every soul on the Gray plantation had heard of escape. Some had planned it. Few had attempted it. But none had ever seen the world itself open a door the way the flames did that night. Aaron didn't shout commands. He didn't need to. People gravitated toward him the way water finds a riverbed. Even in the chaos, his presence was still, anchored, undeniable. A woman grabbed his arm, whispering, "Which way?" He pointed toward the tree line, where pines swayed like watchmen, keeping secrets. The first group left quietly, families holding one another, young men supporting the old, barefoot children gripping their mothers' skirts. The second group moved more quickly, driven by the realization that the patrols would surely be summoned. The third group broke into a run as the wind carried sparks toward the quarter roofs. Aaron stayed behind, watching each group slip into the dark. Not until Eliza nodded at him from the edge of the trees did he begin to walk. Her silhouette was sharp against the firelight, her face streaked with sweat and ash. "Stay behind me," she said. "No," Aaron replied. "I'm behind no one tonight." The forest swallowed them within seconds. The pines closed overhead, forming a cathedral of shadows. Rain filtered through the branches, heavy but protective, erasing footprints almost as soon as they formed. Somewhere behind them, someone cried out fear or relief, no one knew. Aaron slowed and listened. Frogs croaked, branches shook with wind. No dogs yet. Good. They crossed marshy ground where the mud pulled at their ankles like grasping hands. Children whimpered, and mothers whispered songs from memory, low rhythms in Congo and Yoruba, carried across generations like invisible torches. One man stumbled. Aaron lifted him without breaking stride. By the time they reached the ridge, the entire plantation was visible below, a valley of flame. Sparks swept upward like souls freed from suffering. No one spoke, not even to each other. Every person watched silently, the way mourners watch a body lowered into the ground. Except this was not mourning. This was closure. After several minutes, Eliza inhaled deeply. "They'll come after us." "I know," Aaron said. "You planned for that too." He looked toward the swamp, where mist thickened like a wall. Fire opens roads, fog erases them. They descended into the wetlands. The trees grew twisted and ancient, their roots rising like claws from the earth. The water was cold and black, reflecting none of the fire behind them. At one point, the sound of distant barking pierced the night. Some froze. Others began to pray. "Keep moving," Aaron whispered. "They won't cross the river." "How do you know?" someone asked. "Because they're afraid of everything they can't control." The group waded waist-deep across the water. The dogs reached the bank minutes later, snarling, pacing, then stopping whining, confused. The river carried the scent of ash and rain. It carried the scent of change. When they finally reached the far side and climbed onto solid ground, the night felt different, lighter somehow. The fire behind them dimmed, replaced by a sky full of stars. The ridge they had left behind burned like a pyre, but the air ahead felt wide open. "You think they'll rebuild?" a man asked. Aaron shook his head. "No. The fire remembers." The group rested beneath the tallest pine. No one slept. No one cried. They simply breathed, the way people breathe when they've finally stepped into a world that can no longer claim them. And for the first time, the night did not feel like a prison. It felt like possibility. Freedom, they learned, was not an open road, but a hunted one. Patrols rode through the woodlands for weeks after the fire, swinging lanterns that carved trembling cones of light through the trees. They searched for footprints in the mud, broken branches, abandoned scraps of clothing, anything that could lead them to the runaways. The group split after the second night, not out of fear, but necessity. Smaller numbers moved faster. Families traveled north toward rumors of safe harbors. Young men headed west into the hills. Aaron, Eliza, and 3 others headed south toward the marshlands that spilled into Mobile. Swamps were dangerous, but danger was relative. Better to face alligators than men with ropes. Days blurred into one another. They walked until their feet bled, then walked more. Nights were worse. The swamp sang with insects and unseen creatures, and the cold seeped into bones like regret. Food was scarce, sleep impossible. Still, no one complained. They had all lived under harsher masters. One morning, Aaron spotted tracks' boot impressions, fresh, pressing deep into wet earth. Patrols were close. Too close. He motioned for the others to scatter. The group hid in the reeds while Aaron and Eliza crawled into the hollow trunk of a fallen cypress. They stayed there for hours, breath shallow, surrounded by darkness and the slow drip of swamp water. The patrol passed within feet of them. Aaron counted their steps, their voices, the weight of their guns. He could distinguish Pike's old patrol patterns in the way these new men moved, patterns of arrogance, impatience, sloppiness. Men confident the world still belonged to them. But Pike was gone, and the world had already shifted. That night, they made camp on a small patch of dry land. Eliza's voice was softer than usual. "They'll catch someone," she whispered. "They always do." Aaron nodded. "But not all." She pressed the vial of ash into his hand again. "If they catch me, don't come back." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You know I will." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You're fire, Aaron. Fire moves forward. It doesn't return to ashes." On the 5th day, fate reached them. A patrol caught 2 members of their group, Samuel and Ruth, near the riverbank. Aaron saw it from a distance, helpless, forced to watch from the reeds. The patrol questioned them. When the pair refused to speak, they were beaten, dragged back toward the gray estate ruins. Eliza knew what that meant. "We have to leave," she said. "Now." "What about Samuel and Ruth?" Aaron asked. "They've made their choice," she whispered. "We have to honor it by surviving." But survival was not what destiny gave them. On the 7th day, as they neared the outskirts of Mobile, they were ambushed. Eliza was seized, first ropes around her wrists, voices shouting over her cries. Aaron lunged forward, but another man tackled him. He fought with everything he had, breaking free long enough to see Eliza hauled upright on horseback. She did not scream. She did not beg. She held Aaron's gaze, eyes full of something deeper than fear, resolve. "Aaron," she said softly, voice calm even as they forced a noose around her neck. "Don't let them decide the ending." He surged forward again, but hands restrained him. Blows rained down. The world turned red, then black. When he woke, she was gone. The tree stood silent, its branches still swaying. Aaron sat in the grass for a long time, staring at the ground where her shadow had fallen. He did not cry. His grief was too deep for tears, too hot for sound. Fire takes, fire gives, and now it had given him something terrible and sacred. A reason. He rose slowly, the vial of ash clenched in his fist. The swamp wind shifted. History shifted with it. When Aaron reached Mobile, the city was already vibrating with a tension that felt like metal struck too sharply. The country was splitting along every seam, arguments in taverns, soldiers drilling in muddy squares, posters calling for loyalty to the Union or the Confederacy. Aaron kept his head down and his hands busy, working the docks by day and sleeping beneath warehouses by night. His muscles made him useful. His silence made him invisible. But war has a way of finding men born for fire. When the Union Army pushed into Alabama, blue coats marched like a tide, heavy, relentless, loud. They brought cannons, songs, flags, and fearlessness. They also brought curiosity, staring at the tall, quiet man who moved through swamps with the ease of a heron. Aaron first approached them during a skirmish near Tensaw River. A unit of Irish soldiers struggled to find a crossing point without sinking waist-deep into muck. Aaron stepped from the cypress shadows like a ghost choosing to appear. "You don't want that path," he said. The lieutenant nearly shot him. "And why's that?" the officer demanded. Aaron touched the mud with his toe. It swallowed the print. "Because the swamp eats men who think they own it." The soldiers exchanged glances. "And you?" the lieutenant asked. "You think you know it?" Aaron didn't answer. He simply walked ahead. They followed. Within minutes, he led them across a narrow, raised ridge hidden beneath reeds dry enough for horses, firm enough for cannons. The lieutenant stared, astonished. "What's your name, son?" "Aaron Gray." The men nodded as if recognizing the name, though they hadn't. But war listens to instinct, and instinct told them Aaron was someone whose footsteps the earth respected. From that day forward, he became their guide, though he refused the title. He showed them safe crossings, enemy supply trails, abandoned storage barns, and small bridges that could cripple Confederate movement if burned. He walked with no rifle, no knife, no fear. All he carried was a torch. "You fight with fire?" one young soldier asked him. Aaron shook his head. "I speak its language." Campaign after campaign, his reputation grew. Soldiers whispered about him at night, saying he never slept more than 2 hours, that he could smell danger before it arrived, that animals went silent when he passed. Some swore bullets changed direction around him. Others claimed he had walked straight through a burning depot without flinching. Whether true or not, the stories traveled. One Union commander, a man hardened by Shiloh and Vicksburg, asked him, "Why do you help us? This isn't your war." Aaron tilted his head toward the horizon where smoke rose from another plantation burned by Union troops. "You're not burning what I built," he replied quietly. "You're finishing what I started." The commander held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let's finish it." Aaron led raids with the precision of a man taking notes on fate. He pointed out hidden paddocks where Confederate officers stored horses. He identified barns filled with gunpowder. He tracked wagon routes by the pattern of crushed pine needles. Every fire that bloomed behind Union lines was a sermon he had written years before. He never gloated, never celebrated. But the soldiers began carving a nickname into rifle stocks and camp tables. Gray's Fire. One night, after guiding a regiment to a vital crossing, he stood alone beside the river, watching the water turn gold from the flames behind him. A young private approached. "You ever think about going home?" the boy asked. Aaron didn't look away from the fire. "I am home," because fire, to him, was no longer destruction. It was memory. It was justice. It was continuation. And the war, whether it knew it or not, had become an extension of his story, one final blaze that would reshape Alabama forever. When the war ended, stories scattered like embers on wind. Some said Aaron Gray died at Fort Blakely, standing in waist-deep smoke with a torch raised like a banner. Others said he vanished into the swamps the night the Confederacy fell, walking into mist thick as cotton with no intention of returning. A few claimed he traveled west, joining maroon communities hidden in river basins, where men lived free long before freedom was law. But the most persistent story, the one that survived generations, was stranger, quieter, and harder to kill. Old farmers near the ruins of the Gray estate spoke of a figure seen at the tree line every spring when lightning storms cracked open the sky. Tall, silent, bare-chested, watching. They said he appeared for only a moment, just long enough to make the air hold its breath. Children asked their elders, "Is he dangerous?" "No," the elders said. "He's memory." After emancipation, no master rebuilt the Gray plantation. The land remained untouched, overrun by vines and wildflowers. The big house was never reconstructed. The cotton fields grew wild. The river changed course as if avoiding the soil entirely. Surveyors who walked the property insisted the air felt heavier there, as though carrying something ancient, unrest, or perhaps reverence. Travelers passing through Alabama heard versions of the tale in porches, schools, and juke joints. The man who made fire bow and made masters kneel. Some versions said he became a preacher. Some said he carried Eliza's ash with him to his dying breath. Others said the ash itself was scattered into the swamp and transformed into the mist that shields the land each storm season. Mothers told their children, "When the sky turns orange at night, someone's remembering." And the children nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Decades later, when historians interviewed elders in Mobile about slave revolts, many shook their heads sadly. Most uprisings failed, the researchers said. But the elders corrected them. Failures don't make fire. Failures don't walk out of burning fields. Failures don't leave a scar on the land itself. One woman, wrinkled, blind, voice thin as reed, told the story differently from everyone else. She said that her grandmother once met Aaron Gray after the war, that he spoke few words, that he carried something wrapped in cloth, that he limped slightly, as if the earth was holding him back. "What did he say?" the historian asked. The old woman smiled. "He said the fire never wanted revenge. It wanted balance." Balance, a word that meant as much as freedom and twice as much as justice. In time, the legend became a compass for anyone who felt unseen, unheard, unprotected. Activists in the 1,920 seconds invoked his name in whispers. Blues singers worked his story into verses. During the Great Migration, families heading north told their children, "Remember Aaron Gray. Remember what he taught the night." And what did he teach? That obedience is not destiny. That silence can be preparation. That fire, when guided by purpose, becomes a teacher, not a weapon. But most of all, that nothing built on forced obedience stands forever. The ruins of the plantation still remain, overgrown but unmistakable. Every few years, lightning strikes near the old gin foundation. The fire burns hot, then dies quickly, as if bowing to something unseen. Visitors ask locals why the land behaves that way. The locals answer with a shrug, because the fire still prays there, and somewhere, whether in memory, myth, or the deep of the pines, a tall, silent figure remains, watching, guarding, ensuring the night never forgets the name, Aaron Gray,